Good afternoon and welcome to Funny Like a Clown podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Wirth, coming out of Boston. Rainy day in Boston, so we're going to deal with the rain, but what's the old saying? You can either run from the rain or learn to dance in the rain, and if you go to Boston, there's probably some homeless people showering in the rain, you know, a little bar of soap out on the street, but hey, there's some nice parts of Boston and some bad parts of Boston. But this is episode 21, April 20th, 2019. As always, Funny Like a Clown podcast is brought to you by G Vegas Buffalo Sauce for the spicy, sweet, savory taste of game time. There's only one G Vegas available at gvegas.webs.com. Today we're going to be discussing the Jerky Boys, and to do that I have New Hampshire comedian Jay Grove on the line. Jay, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Dennis. There's no one I would rather dance with the rain with than you.
That's right. We could do our own little soap and water dance out there in the rain. But how are things treating you in New Hampshire?
We're doing great up here.
Yeah, all right, that's good.
Raining here as well.
It's raining there as well. All right,
far from you.
Pretty much all of New England's getting it, but yeah, I mean, you're a comedian out of New Hampshire. I'm a comedian out of Mass, and you know, most of the comedians, other than a few knuckleheads, we're all friends on Facebook, and we're Facebook friends. And one day you posted, someone has to like the Jerky Boys besides me. And I was like, someone else likes the Jerky Boys, and we were shooting quotes. But what makes you such a Jerky Boys fan?
You know, I think initially it was just something that was so cool. You never thought about doing it. And it's a different time. I'm in my 40s, so I think for a lot of people they don't understand the nature of the crank call because now you can't. You can't crank call.
Right, yeah, with all the blocks they got on cell phones nowadays, right?
Exactly. It takes all the fun out of it. But I think having the ability to hear somebody do that it was pretty cool. And I can remember actually sitting down your way, sitting out in Gardner, Mass, listening to Jerky Boys 4, just thinking, this is great. Like they'll do these forever, and then very quickly they weren't able to. But I think just the fact that people would respond to it and react to it, and it would be so over the top and ridiculous. I remember hearing the first one and thinking that they must have spliced this. They must have done it. There's no way people are falling for
right. A lot of editing involved, right?
And that kind of thing. And to find out that they really were, it was hysterical to me.
Yeah, it was the biggest thing going for a short time there. Then and, you know, I thought about this one myself, and I had trouble choosing. But out of all the calls, what one's your favorite call?
You know what? I thought about that because I said that's a softball toss. I know he's going to at least ask me which one's my favorite.
It's tough. It is.
So I went back and listened to a bunch of them. I know that the big characters usually get the attention. I'm a big ass Bob the Cattle Rustler guy. I liked the lawnmower call. And I liked his massage call. I thought those were probably the two best ones.
Right. He was the womanizing big truck driver there. But
he drove the truck driver, yeah. He said, my ass looks like a bag of that ricotta cheese.
Yeah, right. I like the one a lady hangs up on, he calls back. We seems to have been disconnected. No, we weren't disconnected. I hung up on you.
Yeah, I thought he was. There were a couple, stuff like that. I wish they had done a little bit more with him. But you'd hear a call like that and go, who's getting this call and responding to it like it's a real person? To me, it was so over the top, it was silly. Right. I was always surprised people would respond to it.
So let's see, we got, they're from Queens, New York. The Jerky Boys consisted of childhood friends Johnny Brendan and Kamal Ahmed. They formed in 1989, and they went on to do tapes until 2002 when Kamal left the group. Bresnan continued until 2001. And then it stopped after the release of their final album, the Jerky Tapes. But apparently there was a little bit of a rift there between the two. They ended up not talking at the end. I don't know if it was over money or what it was over. But they had quite the long career there. I mean, 89 to 2002. We could only hope to be famous for that long, right?
Right. My understanding was always that the split was Johnny Brennan, who did a lot of the more popular voices. And I think it does some voice work on Family Guy. Now does Saul on Family Guy.
Yeah.
But Johnny Brennan, I think, was getting a little more of the attention. And it was a money thing where it had always been 50-50. And then as the Johnny characters, Frank Rizzo and Saul Rosenberg, started to get more of the attention, the idea became, why am I splitting the money 50-50
you
with you?
wanted a bigger cut?
70-30 of the voices kind of thing.
No, I wouldn't be going that for either if I was one of the original founding members. But that's how it goes. I mean, look at the Beatles. They wanted to give Ringo less because he wasn't one of the big influences like McCartney and John Lennon. But let's see. Calls were made in character from classified ads in the newspaper by voices that were influenced to them by family members. And, you know, I thought about it that it's illegal to make a prank phone call. If you're calling out and recording somebody, that's actually illegal, which they kind of caught onto in their later albums. Because if you listen to an original tape when they first came out, when they said some of the phone numbers, it was the actual phone numbers. Then when they reprinted the album, they had to go back and dub in 555 instead of the actual phone number because it was illegal to do. But on the other hand, if people call you, you are allowed because they're calling you. You can record them. So the first album was them calling people, which was when they got in trouble. Then they had to put ads in the paper and have people call them, so it'd be a legal thing. But
oh wow, is that why that happened? I know. It was the Jerky Boys 3. They had the incoming calls about the game show contestants.
Yeah, that's why they had to do incoming. Yeah, because it was legal to record an incoming call because they're calling you. Where outgoing calls, it's illegal.
Kidding. I never thought of that. Wow.
And yeah, and I mean. Do you remember the eyeglass one, Saul Rosenberg from Dr. Tanner from the Empire State Building?
Yes, I do.
Well, do you know how many phone calls Dr. Tanner's office got after the release of this album? So they got in trouble for that too, because they're releasing the actual phone. Places people could call. They were getting sued by him because, I mean, they were just burning up the office. So they did it. I don't know if they got fined or how it all ended up, but I mean they figured out how to get it done in the long run by having people call in. According to their record label, Laugh.com, to date, they have sold over 8 million CDs. And I'm trying to do the math. Back in the day, we paid $10 at least for a CD, right? So I mean, you do 8 million CDs times $10, that's $80 million right there. So. I mean, granted, you got to pay, record companies and they pay to have them printed, but whatever their cut was, they're not hurting for money.
Right. You wouldn't think.
Yeah, I remember, Garth Brooks, the country singer, he said, I got more money than my grandchildren's grandchildren will ever spend. And, you don't realize how much money big artists like that get till you hear figures like that, then it's almost shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, I would think they would have to have done, I mean, when there was no overhead necessarily, besides maybe the lawsuits.
Yeah, the lawsuits and having them printed up. I mean, that's a good chunk they got to keep, yeah. But, I mean, you look at a lot of sports stars, too, they say, yeah, we made a lot of money, but when you live that lifestyle, you spend a lot of money, too. A lot of the sports stars end up broke, so who knows what they did with their money, right?
Sports stars I can picture. It's hard for me to picture just these extravagant lifestyles of the Jerky Boys.
Yeah, who knows what they were up to, right?
Just blowing money up.
Let's see, on February 25th, 2014, Rolling Stone published an article where Johnny was in there and he recounted several phone calls and he did some phone calls. But now we're about the same age now. Leading up to the Jerky Boys' big release, do you remember the Red Tape?
Yes.
They were called the Tavern Tours. That was a bootleg tape, okay, that was never released, mainstream until after the Jerky Boys. But it went around to a lot of college radio stations where there were a couple of kids calling into the Tube Bar back then and talking to an angry bartender called Red. What do you remember about that?
Yes.
Well, what do you remember about the Red Tape?
I had heard those. Now that I didn't hear until well after the Jerky Boys stuff had come out,
Right.
because I don't think it was ever released majorly, like you said. But it was one of those things. Once you became a Jerky Boys fan, you kind of heard about this kind of bootleg underground, and going back with those I think would have gotten them not just sued but arrested. They were.
Oh, they harassed that man to no end. Yeah, I actually did. Yeah, they said that one of the guy's friends at a bar, he told him, he's like, just go up and tell Red you're the guy who makes the phone calls. And Red actually pulled a gun on him, thinking, and his friend had, no, it's not him. I just told him to say that. But he had that guy pissed. He was ready to kill the people. But other than that, I mean, at the same time of the Jerky Boys, they had the Touch-Tone Terrorists. They had the Musacha tape, which was supposedly friends of the Jerky Boys that were involved in it, but they didn't get to be on the thing. They put out their own tape. After the Jerky Boys came out, Crank Yankers with the Pummets and the Jimmy Kimmel Show. You remember Crank Yankers?
I do, yeah. I was never a huge fan of that.
No, that was Jimmy Kimmel before he went on to late night TV. He had the Man Show and he had Crank Yankers, but
I feel like Tracy Morgan did one of the voices on Crank Yankers.
Oh yeah, Dave Chappelle, Sarah Silverman, Mitch Hedberg. He had a lot of big fans come in and call and do the voices. Yeah, but actually, here's something I didn't know until I actually looked into it a little bit. But before the Jerky Boys released their mainstream tape, there was a bootleg tape, like the Red Tape that went around about it. And Howard Stern got a hold of it, and he was playing some of the bootleg stuff on his show, and that's what made them so popular that they were able to release their first album. And then it just went crazy after that. But
And I think they reference Howard Stern in a couple of the later skits. I think it was Saul that calls and tries to have Howard Stern taken off the radio.
Yeah, he called the Food and Drug Administration, right?
Yeah.
But I think they couldn't call anybody and mention them by name because if people know about it, they're gonna get too many phone calls. I think Howard gave them the okay. Yeah, go ahead and use me. Nobody's gonna get in touch with me anyway. But they were having trouble using people's names on it because they get sued because they're getting so many prank phone calls. But so it became bigger than life. I mean, I remember I was at work and something happened, and just off the top of my head, I referenced the Jerky Boy reference because it reminded me of it. And this 17-year-old kid's like, "What did you just say?" I told him, "Is that from the Jerky Boys?" He was shocked that some of my age. I'm like, "I was listening to the Jerky Boys before you were born, kid," but didn't realize some of my age would know who they were. But a whole new generation's being introduced to them, and I guess
it's a funny thing. It's a very fraternal thing. It's always when someone's able to pick up on a Jerky Boys reference, it is always kind of that thing like, oh, okay, all right, we're kind of on the same page, because it wasn't. I never thought of it as being super mainstream. I know they had the movie out, and that kind of was. I think that was before Jerky Boys 4. So Jerky Boys 4 was kind of a highly anticipated release, but it never felt like a big thing to me. It felt like an underground thing. So anytime someone does get one of the references,
right.
You tell somebody they're going to come down. They say, "You want me to bring my toolbox?" Like that. When they have those kind of little references that people get, that's great. I always think that's funny.
Sure, that was. I mean, we were at work. We were constantly, when they were hot, me and my friends constantly using quotes from them. But you mentioned the next thing I was going to bring up was the Jerky Boys movie, and it just got destroyed by critics, and it wasn't a big hit. But I mean, they become so popular that they had to try. But what do you remember from the movie?
I have watched it recently. I've watched it in the last 6 months.
Really?
Yeah, I showed it here at work, and we had a Jerky Boys movie viewing party, so I think probably 3 of us sat and watched that.
Okay, and how was it so many years later as compared to watching it way back when?
It's not a good movie. They weren't actors. I mean, they were definitely funny, but it's like when Howard Stern hosted Saturday Night Live, and you realize, okay, he's good at what he does, but he's not necessarily funny.
He's not a comedian,
they were terrible
right?
actors. I forget, there was one legit actor in that whole movie. I think it was Armand Asante maybe or something. I forget who it was, but it was terrible. If you knew the calls, the movie was kind of funny. It was funny to see a guy who was Brett Ware. It was funny to hear them but other than that, like, it wasn't a good movie. The plot was kind of foolish. It went back and forth between trying to kind of be a funny, I wouldn't say a family movie, but kind of a plot-heavy movie, and just being this really brutal, nasty.
It's tough. I mean, how do you make a movie about phone calls? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it was.
It is, and that's kind of where the movie was, though. I mean, that's all they were known for. It's not like there could be some sort of romantic plot twist or anything. They were just these kind of hammerheads who made these phone calls. Yeah. So, other than the parts where they made the phone calls, the movie itself was horrible.
How do you put a plot around that, right?
Yeah, that was kind of the big end. I hope I'm not spoiling the movie for anybody, because it came out 25 years ago. But
you haven't seen it by now.
The big twist at the end is that they used these pre-recorded Frank Rizzo calls to kind of talk to the mob boss, and it was, at the time that it came out, I thought it was great, because I thought anything they did at that time was great. So if I could get more of it,
the more of it, the better.
That was great. In hindsight, watching it, it's a nice nostalgia. It's definitely not a good movie by any means. It's an awful movie, but it's fun, and it's funny if you enjoy those characters.
They had a cult following, and if you were a fan, you appreciated it because you were a fan, not because it was a good movie, right?
Exactly, yes.
All right. So let's see. They had their split up over, I guess, monetary reasons, as you brought to our attention, but after that, Kamal quit. After that, they each put out a solo album. Once a Jerk, Always a Jerk was put out by Kamal. Did you see that? Did you listen to that one or no?
I did not know they had solo albums out. No, that's crazy.
Kamal put one out. He put out Once a Jerk, Always a Jerk, and then Bresnan put out Saul's Rusty Trombone, which was mostly ringtones and skits. It wasn't really phone calls. But did you listen to either one of those?
I didn't. I have never heard of either one. I didn't realize they did that. That's pretty good. Do you know dates on those?
Oh, that was way back in the 80s, right after, 2000. They broke up in 2000, so it must have been like 2001. I got both of the CDs, and the one Kamal put out, Once a Jerk, Always a Jerk, there was like a lot of like callback phone calls from calls that were released on the Jerky Boys, like people who would call back. It was the same people, but a second phone call. And
oh wow! All right.
Saul's Rusty Trombone that was put out by Bresnan. It was skits, and they were stupid skits. And you know, if you're a Jerky Boys fan, you're waiting for phone calls. You don't want to hear skits, and neither one of them went over well. And
I would say not if I've never.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we haven't heard of them since. But I mean, I referenced the Eagles. You know, the Eagles are touring now, and I think they're charging like something like $600 a ticket. And there's only one original member left. You know, I mean, I don't care what the Eagles do; they're never going to be, you know, as popular as they were as a unit as their original big lineup. You know.
Yeah.
So I don't think Bresnan and Kamal, you know, neither one of them are going to be as good solo as they were together because you remembered them together, and that's how you want to hear them, if you're a fan anyway.
Yeah, I think that's what made it. Something like that's got to be tricky because you come up with these characters and you're doing it. I remember reading, I don't remember if it was in the Source magazine or something, but I remember reading an article with them where they talked about we just kind of get in a room and drink a couple beers and just make these calls.
Go at the calls.
It's a little different, like with anything. You know, once someone tells you, okay, that's great, now we need another one just like it in 6 months.
Right.
It takes some of the fun out of it. It can put some strain on it. If you feel like, if you and I are collaborating on something like that, and we're just friends doing it, and it's fun, and then someone goes, okay,
turns
now
into
we're
work.
going to pay you do it again, and you're doing the bulk of the writing, you start looking at me going, wait a minute. What's this guy doing? Why am I getting paid less? So I can see why it kind of...
That's what breaks up a lot of the big tandems, though, money. Money is the root of all evil, they say. I mean, there's a lot of big acts that...
Well, I'd love to have enough to know if that was true.
Yeah, I don't know if it was true or not, right? All right.
At that point. But, yeah, I mean, I can see why it didn't last. I mean, obviously technology changes, and when people start screening their calls, I think that kind of puts a damper on it when they could call you right back. But I also think that there's got to be, even though they were comedic, I would look at them more similar to a band where you're trying to generate material to commit to a recording, and you have your whole life to do the first one, and then all of a sudden it's, okay, we need another one by this date. And
right.
You know,
now you're under pressure, right?
Yeah, I'm sure as they went through, there were pressures to kind of go, well, we can't really do that.
Do you know how many phone calls there must have been that didn't make the tapes? I mean, I'm sure they took the best of the best, but there must be all kinds of archive footage of, you know, footage they didn't use, phone calls they didn't use.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm surprised if there was. I thought they had done had some unreleased stuff, or were talking a while back about coming out with something that I guess would be considered new to the listener, but was just archived stuff.
Right. Yeah, if you search the internet, you can find some bootleg stuff you hadn't heard. So it's over there.
I always look at things like that as if it were that good, it would have made the cut. And even on some of the older ones, I mean, you're talking 21, 22 tracks, and there'd be some classics, but there's some pretty forgettable ones on there too. So these are the ones that didn't make the cut. How much do you really want? I mean, you want to hear it because it's new and it's unique.
Right.
You want to hear it. So,
but the fans want to hear it.
Came out, I'd listen to it for the curiosity factor and the nostalgia factor. It'd be interesting to hear.
Sure. I do want to warn people, all right, in prepping for this interview, I went and I Googled the Jerky Boys, and there's apparently another Jerky Boys, and it has to do with X-rated movies and four guys standing around and they're jerking things that aren't phone calls. So if you do Google the Jerky Boys, make sure you put the word phone in there, okay? Because you don't want to come up with the other Jerky Boys. I'm going to have freaking nightmares tonight over what I say. So, you know,
goodness, I hadn't made that mistake.
Yeah, you don't want to come up with the wrong Jerky Boys. There's some images that'll scare you with those poor guys. But anyway, Bresnan went on to have a weekly podcast discussing the Jerky Boys. There was an episode where people could actually call in and talk to him and ask him about a question of the Jerky Boys. It ran 17 episodes and then just abruptly stopped. And asked later on why it stopped, Bresnan said there was no money in it, which I can attest on Funny Like a Clown podcast. You do it because it's what you love to do. It's not a big money thing unless you're Adam Carolla or Joe Rogan and got that kind of a following. But you know, you'd think with all the money he made, though, I mean, he's still chasing the money, but who knows what he did with it, right?
Yeah.
Because I saw he was at Rhode Island Comic Con actually. A year or two ago, he was at Rhode Island Comic Con and paying to get pictures with him and do autographs and stuff. So.
Oh, that's cool.
He's still after the money, apparently. If you go to the Jerky Boy website, there is no mention of Kamal whatsoever on the website. So apparently, yeah, they don't like each other so much that Bresnan took him totally off of the website, but he was the one who quit. So,
I guess that's what you get Yeah.
I guess. I mean, well, it's like Guns N' Roses. I know Axl Rose, he ended up with the name legally Guns N' Roses, but he was touring for a while with a bunch of people who had nothing to do with the band, but he owned the names, the legal rights to the name,
Yeah, but do you really want? I think with a lot of that, I don't want. If I want to go see Guns N' Roses, I'm not going to see Buckethead. I want to see
Slash.
At the very least, Slash. I don't necessarily
Exactly.
care if you give me Izzy or not, but I'm not going to see Buckethead.
Exactly. So I mean,
it was actually an excellent guitar. If you're Nottingham Lace by Buckethead, excellent. Just don't want to see him with Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, he's not who you remember Guns N' Roses for, right? But I know I recently, because I knew you were a Jerky Boys fan, I saw a link on the internet that 20 years later there's rumors about a new album, and I sent you the link. Now, what do you think about a new album after all these years?
I think it would be cool if it were, and that's what I was kind of saying. If it's new material,
right?
I guess it's like that TV show Punks. You kind of figure once it's kind of out of the vernacular, once it's kind of out of the current minds of people, you could be able to get back to it. I would think the risk they run, obviously, if you're using those same characters, it's become such a fiber of what we talk about and reference and joke about. If someone called me and saying they were Frank Rizzo, R-I-Z-Z-O,
yeah, right.
I'd be right through that. So it would be interesting to see if they actually developed a new set of characters who are going back and doing this. But I think that there was a little bit of naivete back in the late 90s and into 2000 when they were doing it, where no one thought of that as a thing to do. There became so many.
People are hip to it nowadays because it became so popular.
It became mainstream. I would think people now are so skeptical and so cynical that they would err on the side. If someone called you and started, say, I need to speak to Brent Ware, you would kind of go, okay, someone's got to be.
Before you were born, buddy, I was doing this before you were born. But all right. In the meantime, Bresna's released 2 apps for the phone. One is called a Jerky Boys Caller app, and the other one is Jerky Boys Pinball. So if you're looking for some apps, I guess you can download those on your phone. I don't have either one of them, but they do sound interesting. So I'm going to name off some characters here, and I mean at the end, just tell me a couple that ring a bell for you. Okay, you already told us. You got Big Old Badass Bob, Curly G, Cradle Rock, Sammy Cox, Mike DeRucci, Harry Getzoff, Jake, Jocko Johnson, Tarbosh the Egyptian Magician, Jack Torres, Brett Weir, Frank Kissel, Nikos Pico, Frank Rizzo, Paul Rizzo, Saul Rosenberg, Rosine, Silverman, and Ali Kamal. I mean, who are some of the more memorable ones other than Big Ass Bob?
Sometimes the ones that had the minor characters. Rosine, if you remember, was the one who kept asking the guy about lobster and balloons. You go, you got the balloons? I liked it that. I licked it that shit.
I licked that shit.
It was hysterical.
Yeah.
And then Mike DeRucci, I think only had the one. Mike DeRucci was like the second track on the first one. And he might have been paintwork. I'm looking for paintwork. And he worked like the rest of us. One of the funny things about Frank Rizzo, who was always one of the bigger characters, if you listen to that first tape, which I'm dating myself by saying it was on a cassette, the first one he ever did, he went by Paul Rizzo. Which I always say is weird.
Well, he mixed up his name. I think he started out one name, and then he's like, what's your name again? And he forgot what he said, so he used the other guy's name. It was an accident. I don't think he meant to.
I'm glad you know. I've always wanted to share that ridiculous fact with somebody, and this is the forum where I get to.
Yeah, because he started out with one name, and then he used the guy's name because he forgot what he had said in the phone call.
Yeah. Curly G, Cradle Rock, that was a good one. But again, there's only so far you could go with that. Pico is probably the one that I use the most. I have a friend, and whenever we're talking, and I was only trying to explain something to he. I think Pico was probably the funniest. When Kissel and Pico are reading this, tortured in the back, he says.
Yeah. He's trying to steal from me. You're a fucking liar, man. I ain't stealing.
You're a fucking liar, man.
Yeah.
I was really trying to explain something to he.
I always,
I was a big Kissel fan. I thought Kissel, Rizzo could be kind of mean-spirited. I thought with Kissel was just such an oaf. And I have a friend up here where anytime we see each other, we always, I'm so full of glee. I should be in the glee club. Kissel just had great lines, and he was hysterical.
Can you read sheet music? Happy anniversary, happy anniversary.
Exactly.
I always liked Silverman. Do you remember Silverman, baby? He was the sports agent.
Yes.
That was one of my favorite ones.
Oh, no kidding.
The baseball player called up. He wanted to play baseball. He's like, all right, next week I got you sell peanuts in the crowd. He's like, I have to sell peanuts? It's like, what the hell are you talking about?
Recently. You know what? If you had asked me at the time, what was his name? I would never have been able to tell you. But I remember that skit. I just listened to that.
Right.
Yeah, Silverman. Jeez.
Silverman, baby.
I think that's when they kind of, it was, I think at that point, by the time the fourth one came out, you could, what was the other one? I think the fifth one was Stop Looking at Me.
Stop Staring at Me.
Stop Staring at Me. At that point, people kind of knew Rizzo, they kind of knew Kissel, so they had to start coming up with these characters, and a lot of the characters are kind of lukewarm. If you remember, they'd have one sketch and that was it.
Right, to try and keep them interested, yeah.
I don't think they had a super long run.
You had to keep doing. Well, the albums they came out with, the original Jerky Boys, as you said, was on cassette tape. The Jerky Boys 2, the Jerky Boys 3, Jerky Boys 4, Stop Staring at Me, and the Jerky tapes. Those were. Then they had, their best of and the releases there.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I mean, MTV was a big thing back in the '80s. Do you remember when they called into the MTV staff room there and they pranked them all day?
No.
No, yeah, and MTV was showing it like they had hidden cameras on the staff in MTV offices and. They were calling in using the voices all day. They didn't know what to make of them.
Oh, wow.
They were more polite than I would have been. I'd have hung up on them. They were putting up with it for a while. And I'm like, okay, bye-bye. But, all right, you want to take a few fan questions, see what the fans have to say about the Jerky Boys?
Absolutely.
All right. I'll tell you the quote that the fans wrote in, and you just tell me. Well, the first one we just covered, Luis Vasquez writes in, yes, this is Pico, which, I mean, that was Kissel's sidekick there. He was an illegal... alien he was given work to, apparently.
And he was trying to get him a hairpiece, and he called it a blonde.
Oh, that's right.
Blonde basket.
Blonde basket. I forgot about that one. Right. Alan Fish writes in, pounds, baby, pounds.
That was now that might have been. I don't know if that was Rizzo or Daruki, but I think that he was talking about the bench work.
Right. How many pieces are you benching? I'm less than 350. You benching 350 pieces? Yeah, no, not pieces. Pounds, baby, pounds.
Yeah, that was one of the first ones on the first one. I think that was either Rizzo.
That was one of the earlier albums, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that was Rizzo or Daruki, but yeah, that was an early one. Yeah, I remember that one.
All right, Rob Stibble writes in, I ought to split your nuts from your head to the back of your ass.
Now, I think that was, I want to say that was Rizzo when a family got sick. Was that Fava Beans?
Might have been Fava Beans, you're right, yeah. I was trying to think of it myself.
There were a lot of threats. Rizzo shouted out a lot of threats.
And people put up with it. I couldn't believe. No, there was few where people got mad or hung up on them. I mean, there was a couple, but there weren't many. Let's see. Randy Fabian writes in, I can pull large pieces of furniture from my ass.
That was the Tarbosh one when he was auditioning.
No, I think that was Jack Torres, wasn't it?
Oh, was it Torres?
Jack Torres, yeah. He was the gay haircut guy there.
He's jumping around with dogs on stage.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Also, I'm known very well for pulling large from your ass. Yes.
Yes. Oh man, I'm rusty. Yes. Right. Jumping around with dogs on stage. Yeah, that's true.
Let's see. Well, he was one of what? He did carving into his head, right? When he did haircuts, I shoot him up in Novocaine and I carve scars into their head. He's that kind of a barber.
So we're down by the trade. Well, holy shit! All right.
All right. Nicholas O'Rourke writes in roofing. Do you remember the roofing skit?
Yes. His wife's up there acting like she knows what the fuck's going on.
Then a couple of them came through the window. Who did you hire to do that? I don't know. I thought I was going to get a break on the price. Couple Mexican guys or whatever.
Yep. I forget what they were doing, hitting each other with a hot tar mops or something. Oh
yeah, the heart mop. Yeah, fired one of them. Fires his buddy through the window. Thinks he's cute or something. But that was some good stuff. But I know. All right. So getting toward the end here. I mean, what's going on with you? I know you're a comedian out of New Hampshire. Well, what's going on with you and your comedy career? What do you want to plug here?
Oh well, I've just up here owning and operating Curly's Comedy Club. We're the only full-time comedy club in the state of New Hampshire. We've been open about a year and a half, and pretty proud of the progress we've made, the acts we've had, and the things we've done here in the community of Rochester, New Hampshire.
Rochester.
So short plug. I got nothing coming up, man. I'm here.
So if they wanted to check out or get tickets or something to Curly's Comedy Club in Rochester, New Hampshire, where would they go to? You got a website or something, or?
Yeah, you can go online to curlyscomedy.com, or if you're listening to the podcast, you can always shoot me a message directly through Curly's website. We'd be happy to provide any listeners of the Funny Like a Clown podcast with a couple of free tickets if you're in the area. We also, coming up next month, we'll be offering pay-per-view options as well through the website, where if you're out of town and want to catch a show or have childcare issues or whatever it is, you'll be able to actually watch the show via pay-per-view as well.
Oh, really? Right at home they can tune in. Really? That's a different
Right
idea.
at home. Because we get our target demographic is folks like you and me who maybe have kids out there and can't always get out to on a weekend or...
Oh, a lot of my friends tell me, I'm going to come see you, man, but I got the kids and stuff, you know. I was like, yeah, I know, I had kids myself. I know what you're talking about.
It gives them an option for a little less money to watch it right at home. And
that's a great idea. Different sells. That's a different idea. I've never heard of that. All right. We end off every show with trivia. Ready for some Jerky Boys trivia?
I'll give it my best.
All right. I'll preface it by saying nobody does good on trivia. Most people go 0 for 3. We've had a couple people get 2 right. Most get 1 right, and a lot get none right. But anybody who gets 3 right, we're sending out a free bottle of G Vegas Buffalo Sauce, our sponsor. You like buffalo sauce?
Not only do I like it, I've been wanting to try the G Vegas. I'm actually hoping to get down in July to the cook-off, so this will be a nice win for me if I can pick it up.
There we go. G Vegas does in Gardner, Mass. They got a big cook-off coming off in a few months. A backyard barbecuer, so if you get a barbecuing. All right, well, go 3 for 3 here, and we're going to ship you out some G Vegas Buffalo Sauce. Let's see. What famous musician's video did Johnny Bresnan appear in, and what was the name of that video? It's a 2-part question.
Mariah Carey, Honey.
Okay, Carey, Honey, you are 1 for 1. Bam! Now I'm sweating here. I'm going to have to mail out some buffalo sauce. All right. And Mariah Carey, Honey, he was in it with, who was...
Eddie Griffin was in it?
That's the Griffin. That's the guy I was looking for, yeah. All right. Now, this one I didn't even know. What cartoon talk show was... where they discussed on? It was cartoon characters who did a talk show, and they discussed the Jerky Boys.
Space Ghost.
I don't believe you knew that one, because I had no idea. Space Ghost Coast to Coast was the name of it. And I didn't even know they took this Space Ghost character from way back when, and they use this character, and they do a roundtable discussion.
Oh, you've never seen... Oh, that show's hysterical.
I mean, I've seen the original Space Ghost, obviously. I didn't know they redid it later.
Too, and that's what got me into it. Yeah, it's very funny.
All right, 2 for 2, man. You could be the first one ever to go 3 for 3. All right. What movie did both Kamal and Johnny appear in, but they did not appear in scenes together because of the dispute? They both appeared in the movie, but it was in different scenes because they couldn't get along. What was the name of the movie?
Oh, jeez. That wouldn't have been the Jerky Boys movie because they were both in that.
It was a movie in 2000. They both appeared in it, but they wouldn't appear in the same scene together because they didn't get along. They appeared in different scenes.
Oh, God. I'm trying to think of an era when somebody would have wanted them, but it was late enough in their career they wouldn't have been talking. And, Private Parts?
No, it was Big Money Hustlers. Hustlers.
Never
Big Money Hustlers. Well, you had me nervous, man. 2 for 3, almost had it there. All right, Jay, I want to thank you for calling in Funny Like a Clown podcast. I mean, being a fan of the Jerky Boys, your parting words, what do you want other fans to know about the Jerky Boys?
I just think it's something that if you have the chance to listen to it, if you haven't ever before, it's a form of the art. It's a form of the craft of comedy, and so it's worth a listen just because it's something that isn't really as prevalent nowadays. So it was a neat little pocket of time when these guys really excelled at that version of the art. It's worth listening to. All
right, check it out. We'll catch you on the comedy scene soon. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, comedian Jay Grove on the Jerky Boys right there, and he's right. You know, with the cell phones, they got them now. You can look at your cell phone and it'll say spam call right on your cell phone. It's tough to pull off a crank call nowadays, but I mean, for the Andrew Dice Clay, they say it was a small amount of time, but he was the biggest comedian on the planet for a small amount of time, and for a small amount of time, the Jerky Boys were the biggest thing on the planet. You couldn't get enough of them, and I hope they do make another album because I'll be buying it. I can't wait. All right, thank you for tuning in Funny Like Clown podcast. Until the next time, keep laughing, keep smiling, because laughter is the best medicine. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.